Scott Moe is the Premier of Saskatchewan and I suppose the most vocal opponent of the carbon tax imposed by the federal government today. He's fighting the tax in court along with the province of Ontario. Scott Moe joins me from Regina. As you can see, Premier Moe, good to see you again. Thanks for making time to speak with me.
Well, thank you, Peter, and it's great to see you.
You knew this day was coming and now it's here and prices are going up for fuel in Saskatchewan. What do you want to say about that?
Well, this is, again, I say one last time, well, not the last time, but this is an unnecessary and ineffective tax that our federal government is attempting to put on the people, the families of this province as they take their children to school and to our recreational activities across the province. It's unnecessary because it doesn't work by the federal government's own numbers. It doesn't reduce emissions. It just costs money to families, and it essentially risks our competitiveness of our export-based industry here in the province.
Oh, okay. Have you calculated what effect the federal carbon tax will have in Saskatchewan?
There's a number of calculations that have been done. We had the University of Regina do one such calculation. The federal member from our province had said that those numbers were actually divorced from reality. When now we have the federal government's calculations, which are, I think, about $3.9 billion would come from Saskatchewan people between now and 2022, with about a 0.6% corresponding reduction in emissions, even less than the reduction that we had received from the University of Regina, a reputable post-secondary institute here in the province of Saskatchewan. So a lot of cost, not a lot of gain on the environmental front. There is another path. Canada and Saskatchewan. Well, Saskatchewan is looking at it, but Canada should as well.
Okay, let me ask you this. A climate report released by the government today warns that Canada is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world, and that's putting us at higher risk for wildfires and flooding and all the damaging effects that people talk about from climate change. The government points to that as evidence that urgent action is needed, and that's why it's in part taxing carbon. To be fair, we saw the same warning issued 3 years ago. But how does that kind of information influence your thinking on this?
Well, that is precisely the conversation we should be having, is how can we actually take action on climate change, not take action on taxing Canadian residents. And the two conversations are very, very different. A carbon tax is not an effective tool in reducing emissions. That's been proven by the government's own numbers that they've received in, I believe it was 2016. It's just not an effective tool. This further confirms what Saskatchewan has been putting forward all along. We need to work together in sharing and innovating in our industries that we have. And I'll speak to Saskatchewan's sustainable industries of agriculture, energy, mining, and manufacturing. We need to share the already sustainable ways that we are utilizing in our practices, share those with other nations around the world. Listen, I was, in the past year, have been in Delhi, India, I've been in Beijing, China. Both places have fairly serious air pollution issues locally right there, and are adding to the greenhouse gases in our nation. A carbon tax on the people of Saskatchewan will do nothing for air pollution in Delhi or Beijing. But what will help is agricultural practices that we have in Saskatchewan and Western Canada, sharing that innovation with farmers in that area, so that they don't have to burn their residue, so that they can actually practice zero tillage practices and other innovative sustainable methods that we are already growing crops with.
Yeah, you and I have talked about some of these mitigation measures before that you've talked about, but I mean, the federal government's argument is they've imposed the tax because they say your proposals don't even get you halfway to meeting what's needed in Saskatchewan to help Canada meet its overall emissions reductions. So what's your response to that?
Well, my response to them is, how does $3.9 billion out to the year 2022 with a corresponding 0.6% reduction in emissions help this conversation in any way? How does that help address the report that they've received here today? It's a large investment, a very small return on the environmental side. Let's get down and have a proper and appropriate conversation about how we can address what is a very global challenge. In addition to the cost of this tax, we now see today, or the last few days, the federal government is also going to charge GST on the power bills, on the carbon tax that is on the power bills. So we have evolved as a nation to a conversation where we are not only taxing in an ineffective way, we're charging a tax on a tax.
The government says, though, it will rebate $600 for the average family in Saskatchewan. So it says it's actually costing the people of Saskatchewan less. They'll actually get more money back from the government than they'll spend in this carbon tax. You reject that?
Absolutely. 70% of what we produce here in the province is exported, and we need to remain competitive with how we produce and manufacture the products that we do. The carbon tax will not be rebated to small businesses. It will not be rebated, or at least the small businesses have no idea how to access it at this point, and will ultimately threaten jobs in many of our industries here in this province. As the U.S. does not have a carbon tax, we compete with them on many fronts. China, India have no carbon tax. We compete with them on many fronts. This is not an effective tax from an environmental perspective, but it is an effective tax if you're looking at moving jobs out of our jurisdiction into other areas of the world.
Okay, a couple of quick things to finish on. Even you, Premier, are eligible for the rebate. Are you going to claim it?
Absolutely. I claimed mine when I submitted my taxes here, and I'm going to take those dollars. I'm going to donate them to the Saskatchewan Party to ensure that they can continue with proper policy development and defending the interests of the hardworking people in this province.
You've challenged the government's constitutionality, the federal government's jurisdictional its jurisdiction in imposing these carbon taxes on Saskatchewan. When do you think you're going to get a decision from the court?
Hopefully sooner rather than later. As they are the court, they will decide on when they come to the correct decision. We're looking for a favorable decision with respect to our constitutional challenge. In addition to us not believing this is an effective policy, in addition to us not believing that the federal government should charge GST tax on a carbon tax, we did not with our provincial sales tax. We put it above the line item. We don't actually think the federal government has the constitutional space or authority to even implement what they are attempting to do. So we're looking for a favorable outcome, and we see other provinces launching a reference case as well in the days ahead. And the fact of the matter is that we're at a point in time now where we see 4 provinces representing about half of the population in this nation that are not in favor of this ineffective tax. They're in favor of quite a different conversation on what we can do to address this global challenge.
All right, Premier Moe of Saskatchewan, the Ontario case I think goes before the court in the next few weeks, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. As always, thanks for your time today. Good to speak with you.
Appreciate it, Peter.